Hello, and welcome to more conversations about the upcoming 2015 North American Systemic Constellations Conference coming up in November in San Diego. My name is Linda Comeau, and today I have with me James Woeber, who is one of the co-directors of the conference, and his talk is on Sacred Ground, Creating Powerful Healing Workshops, and that is on Sunday morning, November 15th. He is also having an opportunity to speak with Leslie Nips, the other co-director, on Friday the 13th, Facilitating from Strength, Cultivating Your Constellator Stance with NLP and Energy Work. Wow. Welcome, James.
Thank you. Nice to see you, Linda.
Nice to see you again. Okay, so first of all, tell me a little bit about your business as a constellator.
I actually come from a background of energy healing work originally, so I've been doing that for about 2 decades now. And 10 years ago, I was introduced to the family constellation work, and it works so incredibly well with the energy work that I started doing that and integrating that into workshops. With the energy work, you're really focusing on the energetic dynamics on a personal level. So the physical body, the emotions, the mental body, the spiritual body, and how those dynamics are interacting with different elements of our lives. And with the constellation work, it's a wonderful adjunct to that because you're really adding a larger systemic perspective and going back and looking more. You do some work with ancestral work, with the energy work, but with constellation work, you really focus on that a lot. And there's a way that they really complement each other because you can move back and forth between both. And I found that both in private sessions and in workshops, I tend to go back and forth between the two of them. You can use energy work to help deepen a process within a constellation. And with constellation work, you can, if you're working with someone on the table, for example, if something ancestral comes up, you can slow things down as you're working, have them perceive something in the field in their mind of imagine where your father is, or what do you feel in this dynamic with your mother, or so forth. So I think they're great systems and they really work well together. So yeah, the business that I have is private sessions and also a training program for teaching the energy healing work with constellation work as part of it. So.
Awesome. Okay, so that leads us into talking about your topic on Sacred Ground, Creating Powerful Healing Workshops. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. I'm very excited about this. The purpose of the workshop is not to tell anybody these are the things that you need to do to create a good workshop. I don't think that's my place, and I really don't think that's of service either. I think that there's so many different styles and backgrounds, and you look at our community and there's so many strengths within the community. So there's a certain way that each one of us will show up differently with the way that we present a workshop. So for me, the idea of the workshop is more about exploring together these different key principles of creating a workshop and what is your own way of doing that. So there will be a lot of hands-on work, exercises that we do, some constellation work that we do. And for me, one of the main things that's really important to keep connected with when we're facilitating a workshop is to really treat the workshop like a constellation itself. You know, there's a way that when a group forms, it's more than just me bringing some material and then presenting some material to the group, and then maybe doing a couple constellations, and then okay, take care everyone. You know, it's much more in depth than that. We really have, with every person that comes in, they're coming in with their own issues and dynamics and their ancestors and families and communities and groups that they're part of. So all these overlapping circles that someone walks in with, and then you have another person walking in with all of their overlapping circles. So if you look around in the circle within a group, you have all these overlapping this entire field of different dynamics going on. And for me, the beauty in watching a group dynamic is in energy healing work, we call it following the thread. There's a way that there's this organic unfolding. There's a natural movement that a workshop goes through that unwinds. So one person shares something or goes through something deep within a constellation, for example, and then afterwards, if you give it time to breathe, there's a sharing that someone says, and then that touches someone and they cry and go into their own work. And if you watch the whole group, it's like following a thread. There's this unwinding that happens in a group. And so if we get away from the model of I'm the teacher and I'll teach you something, and move more in, we're part of this living, organic, incredible system that's moving and has its own plan in a certain way. There's an intelligence to the group, to the unwinding of that. So if as facilitators we can do certain things before the workshop, do certain things as part of the workshop, and do certain things after the workshop to help anchor the work, provide tools, things like that. There's a way that if we can really be in concert with what's unfolding in the field with that dynamic of the group, things show up that we wouldn't show up otherwise. For me, that's one of the great things about doing the work. It's like an art of following what's there, and for me, it's a surprise every time. I learn a tremendous amount every time I do a group, and I find that if I can get out of my own way, which is usually what it involves, and I do certain things in preparation and am mindful of certain things during the workshop, then I get to do less work and I get to be more part of the flow. I'm following the thread of the group and the integrity of the group, the individual healing movement of the group, the strengths and the resources of the group end up carrying the workshop itself. And it's very much like a constellation in that way. It can feel like, you hear facilitators say all the time when you're really in the zone with it, it's like, wow, I'm not even doing anything. I think of going a certain direction with it, and the one of the representatives naturally goes there. It's like we're so much in the flow that we become part of the group and part of the movement. So that's what we're going to be exploring in the workshop, is some of these key things that you can do, and also just have some fun and playing with what supports this dynamic within a group. So that's maybe a longer version of what it's about, but yeah, that's basically what the workshop will be about.
So. That is super exciting. Wow. Oh, that's going to be very cool. Okay, well, I have another question for you. How do you use constellations for self-care?
That's a really excellent question. I think that it's something that we get to, as practitioners, really focus on a lot. I use a lot of energy healing work and constellation work for my self-care, but specific to your question with the constellation work, kind of in the vein of what I was just speaking to, when I get out of balance, I've noticed for myself, it's usually because I've gone into one of my patterns where I'm pushing or I'm retreating in some way. There's some way in which I'm not engaged with the system. I'm not being present. I'm going through some fear response and I'm pulling back, or I've been pushing myself too much and I get exhausted. So for me, a wonderful reset is to step into the field and just imagine what are these elements that for right now I'm being stressed about, and allow myself to be present with those and just allow them to be there. The idea of acknowledging what is, Bert Hellinger's idea, and just allow myself to be there and notice what I'm doing inside of my body in response to that. And for me, that's a key thing as well with the energy healing work, really noticing what you're doing inside of your body, and then doing little tools, little steps inside of myself to allow myself to be more present as part of the system, more allowing with the systemic dynamic. There's things that you can do with, if I notice a place in my body where I'm sticking, like in my chest a little bit sometimes, or sometimes I'm pulling up with my energy and not grounding, I'll focus my energy on that area. I'll energetically put my hands there and hold a loving space for that, and just allow whatever is there to be there. And then from a constellation standpoint, allow myself to connect again with the field and those different elements. And I notice, again, like I was mentioning with the workshop, kind of an organic movement. And like you experience when you're facilitating, noticing, here is the healing movement for me. I'm afraid of going and being more present with this aspect. So that's my healing movement, is to be with that. And as often as not, the healing movement for me is ground and just be in my own body more. I think for a lot of us. So that's a way that I incorporate constellation work and use that for self healing. Which I think is really important to do. It's a great question.
And that was a fabulous answer. Thank you very much. Yeah. Okay, you're good at this. One more. How do you describe constellations to a stranger? Let's say you're at a cocktail party. Somebody asks you what you do.
I think that's also a really good question. In Michael Reddy's, for those of us, I know that you were as well, Michael Reddy did some teleconference calls early in the year that were wonderful, and we talked about that question. I think it's a great question, and it's facilitators' answers. I actually learned a lot in the call of, that's a great way of speaking to it. So for me, the answer is, it's actually quite different depending on the group that I'm speaking to. There's like, if there's someone who's new, who hasn't done a lot of personal process work, then I'll speak to it in a certain way. If it's someone who's done energy work, like a lot of my clients, my students come from energy background because I've worked with them already. And so I'll just elaborate on the energy dynamic like I did before and mention, yes, it's this, and we're including more systemic aspects. If I'm speaking to someone who's very religious, is not into a lot of the energy work or things like that, then I avoid those words, those terms, and I speak to it more in terms of spirit, of there's this larger whole of God, of spirit, and we're all held in that, and there's something going on underneath the surface. There is a way that we're all connected, and speak of it from a systemic way from that place. So I'd say that's one main thing. And then I think the other main thing is, oftentimes I'll ask a lot of questions of the person I'm speaking to, rather than just kind of presenting, this is what constellation work is. I notice that even if I feel like I did a good job with that, they oftentimes glaze over. So even if it makes sense to me, it doesn't necessarily make sense to them. So I've just found that asking questions and really finding out where they're at, what's important for them, is oftentimes the best place to go. And so just asking, a question like, what are you working through right now in your life? What's the main thing that's on your mind a lot? What are you moving through a lot in your life? And people will share where I'm going through relationship dynamics, or, I'm noticing this pattern showing up where my whole family does this. And when I'm stepping out in career, I'm noticing I'm doing the same pattern as my dad, and so, they'll speak to some dynamic that they're going through. So then I'll explain the constellation work in those terms. I'll say, well, for example, with that dynamic, that shows a systemic dynamic with your father. And so what we might set up in a constellation is, if we set up your father and you to start with, or in another scenario, your father and your mother, and then as that unfolded, what we might see, and I know some of this just from them talking, what we might see is this type of dynamic, and then here's potential healing movements that might show up. And so just framing it in that way really helps them really get it in a concrete way where they can feel, oh, that would be the benefit for me. That's what I would experience if I were to come to your workshop or whatever. So I found that that's a valuable way to go with it. And I want to hear the other people's responses to that, because I think there's a lot of very good responses out there with how to respond, with how to speak to constellation work, because I think it's an important question, and we've got a lot of different ways of speaking to it, which I think is good. I think there needs to be the variety, and I think so we can find what the overlapping commonalities are is a very good thing as well. So.
Well, thank you so much. That was really good. This is one of the best interviews, James.
Oh, thank you. That was fast. We're already done.
Yeah. So I'll just remind everyone, James' talk on Sunday, November 15th in the morning is on Sacred Ground, Creating Powerful Healing Workshops. And maybe you and Leslie could come back together and talk about your upcoming talk on Friday.
we'd love to. Great.
Strength, cultivating your constellator stance with NLP and energy work. So thanks again, James. Can't wait
Thank
to
you.
meet you in person.
And thank you very much for doing these, Linda. I think these are really great for the community and wonderful to be listening to. So thank
All
you.
right. Take care.
Take care.